Okay, so I have a little bit of a shortened time slot, but I'll say that again. My full plan for this lecture as a lecture is already on YouTube. So if you're really interested in what I think about this, you can find the video there. And in this time slot, I'll play more with. I'll try and facilitate more communication and a dialogue instead of a lecture style. But I do want to say a few things just because it's kind of a summary of the Montparnasse school of thinking on a personal level, and like I received some criticisms over the last last day or so that I just will openly unpack because it's worthwhile. The first is a note on leadership and hierarchy. I've always felt like there's a paradox with leadership and hierarchy. Like there are people who can directly identify with leadership and hierarchy, and they can tend to become sort of a monopolizing, tyrannical force, you know, on some end. And then on the other hand, there are people who sort of dream of a structure with no leadership and no hierarchy. But then I feel like when that happens, paradoxically, they become the implicit leader. Like they're the leader, but they're not the leader. Or like they're, you know, but it still sort of happens that they're the leader. And I think that's, on some level, it's like equally problematic, and on some level, like it offers new problems and new space for reflection on that problem, because it's kind of, you know, it's kind of like you can't directly identify it in the same way as you used to. Like it's almost similar to racism and sexism back in the day versus racism and sexism now. Is like racism and sexism back in the day was like, that's obviously right. Like they're like people who are explicitly racist or like explicitly sexist. Like they'll come out and identify as such, right? And now like people wouldn't ever come out and identify as such. Like I'm a racist or I'm a sexist, but they're still being racist. So it's like kind of more like like it's harder to identify in some sense, harder to pin down. I feel like that way with leadership in some sense today. So I think that's just a point I wanted to reflect on. Another point I wanted to reflect on is we lost a student, the physicist guy who was here for the first 2 days, and I wanted to reflect on that because I have something to say about that, which is there is a real question to the degree to which natural scientists will be interested in what we're doing. There are some natural scientists who will be interested in what we're doing, and there are some natural scientists who just are not going to be interested in what we're doing, and that's precisely because of the status of the subject. So, for example, in the physicist guy's personal introduction, he said, usually when people come together about thinking, it's just talk, right? He said, it's just talk, and I like more the experiment and the theory and stuff like this. But it's precisely this status of the talking which psychoanalysis takes seriously. So it's just an important theoretical point, which is that the just talking is important, and there are natural scientists who are not going to be interested in that. It's going to be useless to them, and we might lose them, but it's just the way it is. But I still think it's analogous to, like, if I was to go to I don't know, like some presentation on an obscure physics topic, like I would probably be bored out of my mind and want to leave. Like, it's just not for me. And in the same way, us talking is probably just not for some people. The third is the only thing I would change about this diagram is precisely what I was saying in my presentation about reality in the world versus what some psychoanalytic schools call the real. The real is a social antagonism, and it's constitutive antagonism, which really is a condition for being appearing at all. And one of the differences in the way of thinking when you think of the real as some antagonism or some tension or some negativity is precisely, I think, on this important question of social impact. And, you know, this, I think, a very good question, collective intelligence is high, social impact is low, why? I think, like, the framing of the question is a little problematic on the one hand, because you can say, for example, the Holocaust or communist revolution, cultural revolution, social impact was high, you know, like, but is not a good social impact. Like social impact, but what? How can we think ethics, right? Like social impact is all the time going on, like, and what do we really want? Like it's not so clear. Like, and if you study like serious political emancipatory movements, you know, in my personal view, the serious political emancipatory movements in the last 2 centuries have been probably, and here I would like, these are the umbrella terms which others are situated in various complex networks. I'm not saying there aren't others, but I would say that the biggest ones in terms of social impact were probably roughly communist philosophy and feminist philosophy. I think like these large spheres of emancipatory movement have had social impact unparalleled in the last 2 centuries. But if you study like the narratives of these emancipatory movements, like there's always this ideology of the perfect idealization where we'll be free and stuff like this. But again, it's this asymptotic approach which never comes. And it's just that the antagonism morphs and changes. The antagonism morphs, and so like the things that communists or the things that feminists would be complaining about and saying are problematic in one era actually do get resolved, and then they morphs and changes into something different. A new antagonism will structure the field. So it's really, I think, important to think this, you know, and in regards to our group, like the social antagonism, we need to be very mature about these things. Like, it's not trivial at all. So that's what I wanted to say in my personal summary, but I'll get into Ikigai. Ikigai is a concept, a reason for living with, is a concept that Francois Cadell introduced in our workshop when we were first planning the thinking school. And it resonated with me probably just on a personal level, like just because I'm trying to put myself together in some coherent way that could stabilize across time, like, and not fall apart into like homelessness or something like that. But like, you know, but I was when I first was talking about this with some people, there's one friend I have who I shared this concept with, and he was criticizing it because it had the dimension of what you can be paid for. And he was like, you're already presupposing capital, and you're going to get sucked up into capital and stuff like this. And I think that, like, Ikigai, first, Ikigai is just a concept that is a Japanese concept, and it's attempting to stabilize meaning. It's basically a formula to help the subject reflect on stabilizing meaning across the totality of their existence. It kind of presents like...
Are you supposed to be displaying right now or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we're talking in
it just needs to blink.
Yeah, it doesn't. I'm waiting here. No. Is it not working?
Not yet, but it's warming up.
Okay. Let's get
I think that's why there was confusion. You were talking about, and all of us were like, what is it?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's an image on my...
But you know, regarding the social impact, there are a lot of thinkers like Steven Pinker or so on, and they're saying if we look at our times, these are the best of times. There are much less people that are hungry, more people are working, more people are feeling secure. So we have also to think that if we go in a bird view, these times are the best of times.
Yeah, but the present is always a problem for humans. They're always just complaining. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we'll have everything and people will still be complaining.
No.
But I know that it's true.
No problem. And then with what
things are good. Like,
with what you said,
if we go back 100 years, like, we're making 1 cent a fucking hour or something, you know, like.
Yeah, and with what you said, yes, of course, that once you have new revelation, like or new revolution, it opens up a new space of confrontation, or new edges are coming. And this is how things are progressing. It's not a default. It's not a bad thing. It's like
we should be against.
This is how it. We move forward. We open up new spaces for interrogation, introspection, consideration, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the naive forms of idealization should be avoided. Basically, I mean, they're traps. Like playing in a positive way with the
Bit closer.
Because we want new problems.
Yeah, sure.
New problems.
Sure.
requires new thinking and
Yeah.
new lines of light, as Deleuze is saying.
That's it.
It's
It's
good
almost
enough.
there.
It's good enough. It's good enough. So, so the concept of Ikigai is basically a concept that means infusing meaning in being and stabilizing meaningful action across the whole of a life. And the interesting thing about the symbol of Ikigai is the way in which the geometry of all of these dimensions are interconnected. So it's structured in such a way as if you remove one ring, the rest of the rings fall apart. Like it requires basically balancing multiple dimensions simultaneously. And in my lecture style presentation, I try to add some depth to what I think about these rings and knots and stuff like this. But I will, if I have time, I will, but I don't think I will have time to do that here. So if you're really interested in that, you can watch online again. So the overview was that, so with the logic of the concept, I just want to move through the logic of the concept with you as a dialogue. And we'll move through it together. I'll say how I relate to it, and then we can open it up and how you guys relate, each person relates to it. And then if we have time, I'll add depth, but maybe we won't get to it. So the first thing is, here I made this just representation where you have basically what you love to do, what you're good at, what you can be paid for, and what the world needs. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take each ring, I'll take one ring out in each situation. And then Ikigai, there's like, you can look online, they have formulas. So like when you take one ring out, what are you getting, but what are you missing, and so forth, and then we can all relate in our own way as to how we might relate to this. So the first, so I'm going to refer to the ring we take away. So here, the ring we take away is what you can be paid for. So you're good at it, you love it, the world needs it, but you can't get paid for it. And then the formula for Ikigai is it's delightful and full, but there's no wealth. And like, so for me, this has been like this is the most problematic dimension for me personally, because I absolutely live my life for what I love to do. I remember from my first job, I was working in a fish and chip kitchen, whatever. My mom would drive me there, I would cry before going in. I was like, I don't want to do this. I was like, I must do what I love to do. Like, I cannot live without that. So that was like always first, and then I think, okay, well, what are the skills I'm going to need if I'm going to do that, so I can be good at it? Like, am I going to be able to achieve that? And usually the third question I would ask is, how can I make this relevant for the world? It's maybe a question I should put on a higher level or something like that. But this dimension of not getting paid for it, it's, to me in my personal life, it's becoming more obvious, and it's becoming a more obvious ring. Like as I approach, now I'm 32. Like when I was in my 20s, I was like, I can worry about that later or something. But I don't know how each of you maybe relate to this constellation, and how you relate to love and the way it relates to skill and the world. If anyone wants to relate to this, we can open it up. And then it can
I'll go back to what Stefan said earlier, where I think the one weakness maybe in this, and obviously I'm just being introduced to it, so maybe a very naive point, is that what I get paid to do doesn't define me and doesn't have to be doesn't have to be what I love to do. Like, I get paid to do something that both I am good at and I believe the world needs. And if that affords me then the financial independence, and we can talk about that part later, to do what I love to do, then fantastic. But like, I don't need those two things to be aligned. If they are, that would be amazing.
You don't need money to be aligned?
I don't need what I get paid to do and what I love to do to be the same thing. I can do what I'm good at that the world needs, that I will get paid well for, to afford me the opportunity to do what I love to do. Because work, while it is where you spend a majority of your time, it's not where I spend all my time. And it's not where I spend my mental time potentially, or like where I derive meaning out of the world.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Like, and it's actually a conversation I remember having with what my first boss when I worked at a grocery store, because he was like sports is what I love to do, and I'm like, well, why aren't you like going into sports broadcasting or sports journalism? And he was like, if I connect what I love to do with money, then it would ruin what I love to do. And so he's like, I'm just happy being grocery store manager, and then in my free time I'm sports all day.
Yeah, but you know, here you have an issue because you spend so much time at work. If you don't love, if you don't do what you love, it affects the intensity of your mind, because for 8 hours, 9 hours, you're doing something.
That's me. Yeah.
There you are doing something which is boring, not taking your full capacities, and then it's naive to think that when I back at home, or to the space that I call my home, I will be much more intense than I do.
Yeah,
So
that's my position.
the connection must be there, and also the thinking that you don't need to think about what you are going to get paid off is also naive, because we are living in this world. If I will choose to be a monk and to go to the mountains, I don't have to care about how I will get paid. But I live here.
Actually,
and it's part of.
I have. There's an amazing video on YouTube of this Japanese hermit who lives on an island all by himself, and he's lived there for like 20 years, and he like eats virtually nothing. Like he's just walking around on the beach for 20 years by himself. But the most hilarious thing is once a month his sister sends him like 100 yen, however many, whatever yen, because he needs to pick up basic supplies still. So still he can't get out of capital. You know, like he's on the island by himself and so.
Yeah, but we need
still money.
But the consideration of getting paid for whatever now. Yeah. It's an important question, because this is part of the reality. Yeah. You cannot take one dimension of reality and say okay, because this is.
I agree. Yeah.
The thing is, it's not only about being aligned to me, it's also to be not connected at all, and even opposites. Like
something you hate.
if you would destroy what you do outside your work, in your work. I mean, I can remember my cousin. She did studies in ecology, and the only works she could get was pollution. She wanted to work in ecology, and because she was really and then when she was looking for work, she could only work in big company. So she could say, this is where I can get paid and I'm good at, but what is my passion, what I love, what the world needs is
It's collision.
It doesn't even, it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
So how, I mean, it's worse than what you said, or worse than just being isolated.
Yeah, I think it, you know, how I said it was the more extreme viewpoint. I wouldn't work for something where I would get paid that would either be opposed to what I love or that I think takes away from the world. So I can see how they're interrelated. I just don't know if, for me personally, think the circles between what I love to do and what I get paid to do need to have a massive amount of overlap. Because if what I love is also what the world needs, and what I'm doing is what the world needs, even if I'm not fully fulfilled in my job, but it provides me the opportunity to do other things, like, you know, I'm still, I think there are some problems like Balthazar mentioned, but it's not, like my current job, right, one of the things that drives me is, and what I love to do is impact at a local level. Yet I'm dealing at a multinational level where you rarely get to see impact. And so that is a huge demotivator for me. But I also know in some of what I'm doing is what the world needs. It's what I'm really good at. Even if I hate that I'm good at the things that aren't the biggest motivation to me. But it provides me the space to do more what I love as well. So. I mean, I really like the motto.
It could also be that you don't fully appreciate the Eastern wisdoms. That was a joke.
I was like, go on.
No. The deep Eastern wisdom.
So let's go to the other one.
I think the word wealth is not the best one for what you mean. Wealth is not...
This is the Ikigai concept.
Okay, but then still... the word wealth. I would say, but no income, because wealth is not you cannot equate wealth with money, because there is immaterial wealth and stuff like that, so it's a broad concept.
It's just the formula of Ikigai that I'm representing.
Or the translation of this book.
Huh?
Or the translation.
Well, this is just what I derived from the internet.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
what I looked up
But
Ikigai
what's the
and
word
represented
in
the
Japanese that maybe
concept.
it means a sentence, a nuance.
Sure.
That's different.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next configuration is where we subtract what the world needs. So the formula here is that there's satisfaction but a feeling of uselessness. And for me, I personally related to this when I've been writing my PhD thesis, because I was just by myself in the library, you know, reading philosophy books and like feeling like just isolated and like who's really going to even read this anyway, and does anyone really care about this, like
It's called the PhD syndrome.
right, sure, yeah. And like also like the feeling of like when other people send me big complicated texts and I was like, there's no way I have time to read this, and like, you know, at the same time they put all their energy and heart into this, and it's just like information overload basically, and like what are we going to do about that? And then there's also the problem of like, even when you send someone a paper and they like it, and it's still like, well, what do you do with that? Just like, okay, well, you like it, that's great. It's like, so just like a feeling of basically, how do I connect what I love to do, which is research, which is philosophy or you know, academics and stuff like this, with actually what the world needs, and wanting to sort of explore that dimension of myself also, and like and you know, maybe the thinking schools is in part a manifestation of that, and other projects, but that's how I relate to it. I don't know if any of you have any wisdom to share about your experience with connecting what you love to do and what you're good at and what you can get paid for with what the world actually needs. Gita, you want to?
Yeah, as you know, we started in 1988 and 1989, and we thought that our work would be something the world could need. And we did it for us and for the world, but the world wasn't ready. That's an incredibly lonesome feeling, to get not paid and nobody's interested because technology is partly not ready for this yet, some people are not ready. So it's on the other hand, incredibly relieving and a delightful feeling when this is what I wanted to say to you. Anyway, I love you guys. Yeah, because we have searched for you for so many years, and it's so hard to find versatile thinkers interested in doing something which is for themselves and for the world. And when the world finally brings forth these agents of evolution, if I may say so, I think that's a good term for this concept. But when these two circles you removed are missing, it's a place where you love what you do, but you get no love in return. Yeah, and that's hard. It's really, really hard to stay on this path and to say no, another year and hopefully, and then it's 10 years and then it's 20 and then it's 30 as in our place. And you do this and you need willpower, not only passion. I would add willpower to this because that's what you actually need. Ethics, willpower, things like that, not to give up. And to have a clear vision of what the world really needs. You can have this for decades, but you have to wait. Yeah, but because what the world needs is not defined by ourselves, but by the world.
Right. Yeah, it makes me think actually like of Ray Kurzweil's like entrepreneurial secret he always talks about is like that he'll always say that the invention is less important than the timing of the invention. So like that's why he used those exponential curve graphs and charted out the information technology, because he was like, I know what the world will need in 5 years, and then I'm going to prepare for that. And then his predictions were somewhat accurate or something like that, because you can precisely, right, you can precisely miss the curve or be too late for the curve.
Yeah, for example, 30 years ago, we could foresee where politics will go. It's one joke Ralph and I made back then, 1990, 1991, that when this goes on, 25 years later, we will, what's that wählen of English? Vote for CDU.
For who?
CDU, it's a conservative party in Germany. We never thought that we would do that, but it was foreseeable that society will come to this point. Internet has changed everything, and we missed the point where all the promises of the internet have been. Little leaving the space, but it's still about the word, what it means. We missed this point where things in the internet could happen like it's happening here right now. Yeah, we had the FidoNet where everybody was participating, and then we let the corporations in, and then we let advertising in, and then everything went down.
Yeah.
So and that's was foreseeable back then, and now we're here, and it's incredible for me to see that still this power is there, still wants to emerge, cooperation, work together, think versatile, and do something. Yes, passion is also something to me very, very linked to society. And also mission. Yeah, there is no mission without a resonating world.
Stefan?
That is interesting what happened with my mind when I was looking at it. Because there were so many thoughts, but the one is what the world needs. I was impressed that it came actually from a Japanese concept, because I was identifying this idea always with a more American mindset, because I only know from that culture this idea that you should do what your inner call is, and your inner call should resonate with an outer call. Europeans, in my personal experience, are not so much into this inner call, outer call thing. In this inner call, outer call, Europeans, in my experience, don't have that so personal. Huh? I don't know. But what I then, yeah, this is my experience. But then what I then thought is, in my personal experience, I do need something like an outer reference. So what I would define as what gives my my whole day meaning, is that I can, at the end of the day, say that I have created some meaning or value for another, for somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then at the end of the day, I would call this a good day. So very pragmatic. And then my next thought is when I'm with non-academics friends I have, yes, I do still have non-academic friends.
Very few.
Very few. That's another problem. But I spend half of my work life not in academia. So it's very interesting what have changed with my social and very close social bondings. But then I thought, it depends how large this world is. I mean, academics, myself including, since I am in academia again, I think of the world as a really huge entity, with the whole ecosystem world. But when I talk to some of my friends who are not in academia, their world is very small, very close to the daily experience. So their world can be what the world needs. The question would be answered like what my family needs, what my closest friend needs, what my father needs, maybe some mother, family. This is then the world. Or
what you said, can I interrupt? What you said about Europeans don't think in terms of the world needs.
No.
What we hear on the framing of education in our country at least is prepare the children for the needs of the labor market. The world is equal to the labor market.
Oh yeah. Then the world
it's labor market. And that relates to what you get paid for.
Yeah, so it becomes one circle, right?
Well, I don't know that. Well, this may be the very American point of view.
Which is a totally valid point of view. You gotta own it. I don't this self-deprecating American one. You gotta own it, man. Get the flag
It's so
out.
much easier to be self-deprecating about America. I don't know if the world part ever goes away, because I think people invent it. Like a lawyer. But if you ask a lawyer what he does and like what value it brings to the world, they're gonna find value in what they do to the world and why the world needs it, even if the other people don't think that is needed. Investment bankers, the same thing. Like all these areas that we see as like as like these big
But then they define it
pieces.
like labor market, financial system, the political system.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other piece that I found interesting that was very related to one of my favorite stories about people finding meaning in their jobs, even that could be a mundane job, was we used all the time in the U.S. government, was during the space race. President Kennedy visited NASA to give everyone a pep talk and to make them feel better, and went up to the janitor and shook the janitor's hand. And he asked the janitor, "What does the janitor do here?" And the janitor said, "I help put people on the moon." And so he's like, "What do you mean? You're a janitor?" And he's like, "Right, but like if I don't make this place clean and tidy for the really smart people that do this work, they can't do their work. It's not an attractive place." Like it was a very global, to him, like world perspective on being a janitor. And so, you know, when I see that circle go away, I don't think it ever goes away. I think everyone defines it like it never can disappear. Like people will insert a value of what they are doing and how it benefits some level of the world. It's my just personal experience of what I have seen.
I don't agree. From charity work's perspective in Germany, in the Hartz-IV system, many people do think they hate, and they don't find value in it.
Like there's a new, I don't know if any, there's a famous article by David Graeber called Bullshit Jobs.
Yeah.
And anyone read and that, he just come out with a book exploring in greater depth this now theory of bullshit jobs. And basically arguing that like 50% of jobs the world actually doesn't really need.
Yeah.
Like if they were to disappear, nothing would really change.
I think that it's an American perspective.
Sure.
Yeah, and it's not typical German.
I will also refer to that as I guess that in my life, actually, that's the point where I am. Yeah, that I managed to do what I like or sometimes not. Also, I think I'm quite good at it. And I use the part of that could bring money for my family, and I think it is important at this point. But I really struggle with this thing. Is it the best use of my competence at the moment in the world? And of course, there is a question, what I refer to when I'm talking about the world. Because, you know, is it my family, and then, okay, it's fine. Or is it something other? So how I can make the better use of what I managed to, you know, to do till now, and not in terms to be useful, but somehow to make more sense or meaning or something what has a higher value for me. So for me, this question at the moment, and for example, the involvement in an initiative like that, which is, you know, from other perspective quite not really easy to understand, you know, from perspective of my family or my work, you know. So that's not a clear investment, but it is investment in this question. Yeah? So how whatever I know could be more useful. Yeah? So that's my personal, but I would say quite alive question.
Yeah. Again.
I would second that in my own experience. I'm working on bringing new social dynamics, which might have a positive impact. But I never worked on wanting to make the world a better place, because I think it's insane. You cannot just like start, okay, I'm gonna, you know, it's a crazy idea. You just work on your inner calling first, and then you try to make other people happy and resonate with other people. And I think it's a more sane way of framing the question. Basically.
With more rings, no?
Yeah, there's more rings. Yeah, like how I interpret the world as everyone else is interpreting is like the world is others basically. Like that's our world is a world of others.
There's no real objective means to know what the world wants.
Yeah. There's some.
I wanted to meet, you know.
Yeah.
We have 15 minutes.
But I think there are some more or less objective goals you can achieve or things you can avoid. For example, I think Evelyn agrees that it's not good to harm other people or something like this. Or for example, if you decide to go to holidays and you either can take the plane or the train, you maybe say, okay, I better don't fly, even if it's cheaper, because I know the whole population of the world has to pay huge costs. For example, I know that some people are flying to Miami just for 2 days, and then they're flying back to Germany. That's something that I say, this is nothing good for the world, even if I get a special offer for 100 euros, and that would be a huge blessing for me. So I think that, of course, you can say, for example, it's good to say everyone should believe in God or not, but there are some objective goals you can achieve.
I was gonna say, related to like this world needs and the others, like yesterday with the Mio paper, like you come with the Mio paper, and the ring of whether the world needs it or not is extraordinarily important. Like if everyone's like, yeah, we need this, and like we want this, right? Like it's that's an important ring. Like if it's not there, then you're just like open. Like,
But not as an intention. It comes a posteriori.
sure, but I mean, if it doesn't come, it's like, for me it's problematic. Like if what I bring to the world is like if I brought my if I bring lecture material or something like that, or if I write a paper or whatever I'm doing, and it just resonates with no one, it just drops dead. It's just like, you know, it's not a good feeling. So
does it mean the world is a market?
no.
I mean, it's interesting to push it forward because about demand, reasoning about demand versus offer, that there's a demand outside that
Yeah.
it can call you, whether
Yeah.
it's monetary or not.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a demand for you know, saving the world, solving hunger, or it can be a demand to have this particular platform. You were talking about an actual demand of people to use it, so users, so a kind of a more, let's say, normal or mainstream type of market for it. And then there's the calling of yourself towards what you feel you can bring to the world. So there's maybe a two-sided.
Well, the interconnected rings in this representation.
Yeah, but even within the world, there's what you feel being a calling that can be different from what you love, for example.
So it's more like the mission, yeah? Thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next one, which
That's the mission. Yeah,
which
it
is-
the mission.
Mm-hmm.
the next one is
Yourself.
the next one subtracts love, so what you love to do. So in this representation, it says you're comfortable, but there's a feeling of emptiness, and you often hear this. You'll often hear love connected with subjective perceptions of emptiness and fullness. You know, like when love is absent, I feel like there's something missing in me, some hole in me. Or if love is present, you feel alive, like there's some light.
I would say the corporate world at the moment, I think. And young people around Krakow, there is a lot of share services. And the share services. Share service is a
Sharing,
service
okay.
for big corporations, which is just outsourced. You know, so they are
Like telemarketing.
outsourced.
Okay,
There is
good.
so many of them, and they pay very well. You know, so it's very obvious for young people to get there, you know, early, and they are, you know, in the quite high social level. And you know, and they start there for
Yeah,
years.
because you cannot
Yeah,
go out
it's
because
very
you drop
difficult
in
to go
pay.
out, yeah, and then I think that's exactly this situation, and these people walks around like zombies.
Yeah, you become a zombie.
That's absolutely through this corridor and this open spaces, and it's I would say that it's the most of the young people population in Krakow.
It's very interesting. There is something similar in Israel. It's the young population that works in the binary industry, which is
The what
betting.
industry?
Binary. It's a betting thing. They are actually stealing money from people.
What?
What?
Wait, what is this?
The whole world is trying to bring a legal case against Israel on this. doesn't matter. The majority are Russians that are opening in Israel, again, whatever. But it's like this binary option companies. And who goes in, it's usually very young people that come from abroad, so they don't speak the language, and there they need to speak English. They are extra paid. Not only that it's empty, they also know they are damaging privates. But they are kind of, I know a lot of them, they are kind of masking the whole of it, and then they compensate it with as if the status or the level of life. So you have to have the party and the car, and there is no way of pulling them out because it's so higher than the middle social one that they don't step out.
Stefan, you had your hand up?
Oh yeah, well, that's also an interesting picture for me because what I've learned from myself is that whenever I thought, oh, now I'm going into this work, I get a new position or new responsibility. I really love that. Right? And after a while, like, God damn it, why did I make this decision? And then on the other hand, this is something really interesting for me. I didn't love the idea of being a manager. Because the management includes that you have to do a lot with the financials and responsibility with financials and also with HR, both very stressful. and at the HR I began to love, but what I really struggled with for a long time was the monetary responsibility. So this is very interesting for me because when getting good at something, like I got good at financials at one point in time, I started to, in a way, love it. And then I accepted it as a part of the full profession responsibility. But this is something that changes, I think. So you can love something and then you say, oh God, why did I choose it? And then you don't love it, but through you need to do it, you're getting good at it, you start to love it.
But maybe we should have this discussion in the context of the school of thought.
That's what I was hoping would emerge.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping would emerge. Yeah, because I was trying to give examples, personal examples of my academic becoming, and hope other people relate in a similar way. Because ideally the thinking school would be, whether it's the Ikigai representation or whether it's a more complex representation, but that it includes all of these dimensions of the subject in the course. Like the problem with like a lot of academic courses is that they'll only like one of the funny jokes about like most like postmodern social theory grad programs is like, we're going to tell you about how shit capitalism is, and then you're out in the world competing in capitalist world. Like, and that's just the way, it's like absolutely not taking into consideration the whole of the subject and stuff like this. So, yep.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to cut you.
You did, so. I'm just joking. Go.
Yeah, I wanted to add something about love in what you're doing, is that you can have lots of love for what you're doing, but sometimes it can create some suffering, that if your work doesn't love you back, or the world doesn't love you back, or the fact that, I mean, it can create some
That's what this representation is trying to get at. If you love something, but then one of the like, if you love something, but the world doesn't love you back, right? Then that ring's not there, right? So, and that the Ikigai concept is trying to represent the fact that all of these rings are interconnected with all the other rings.
Okay. Oh, so it's a double way process, because
all the rings are connected with all the other.
Because your mission of doing something for the world, does it imply that the world loves you back or not? For me, it didn't. It's just that I'm happy because I'm doing something for the world. Should I expect the world to love me back or not? That's the other side.
You shouldn't expect. Like it's not necessarily the case that the world will care.
Yeah. So it's not if you take away the world that this issue is addressed.
Yeah, precisely.
I just, in general, this resonates with me because it reminds me very much of a result that we had from working with women in poverty, co-creating knowledge with women in poverty, which I did for 10 or 11 years, and it was like the most enriching experience, the most enriching job in my life. And it's called 5TWIN, 5 types of work integrating network. So here you have 4 elements. So the difference is that we call it work, it's more dynamic. And instead of overlapping, static rings, it's more like a flower with 5 petals that can, or a human figure that can dance and over. So you get more dynamic. So instead of saying to make money, you will call it productive work, which means you need to be able to fulfill your material needs. But it could be connected with what you call the social work, is not community work or something like that. Like if you share a car or a house or a room, that provides in your material needs without the intervention of money. It's all, and the other one is the self-work, which could be your talents, but also what you love, and, your self-confidence, your identity, your happiness, your health, physically, etc. And then the 4th one is the care work, and the 5th one is keeping things in balance. It's a yin-yang symbol that we use for that, because the productive is sometimes contradictory to the self-work or to. But as long as there's some of the white and the black and the black and the white.
There's trade-offs, yeah.
It will be balanced. And when you feel there's no more balance, then you know that you have to do something about, you get depressed. That's a signal that, do self-work or in therapy or whatever, but also look where it came from, And so it resonates, but it's more dynamic and it includes the social, which I miss here. Here I have my heart, my talent, the world and my mind.
Well, the world represents I think the world to me represents others.
I put it on the drawing that we made Monday morning. We had to make 2 drawings, one in 2 colors. I can put it on the drawing. May I say something? Yeah.
But we want to read the last reading.
I find this point really, really, really important. There are so many groups out there, so many ideas, so many schools. Yeah, and I think it's time to put on a systemic perspective on this and to see that this cannot be done without the masses, without the world, without the people, in a way contributing into this. As Kevin said, it's hard to do work from above. Yeah, there will always be this, no, I don't need it, I'm not interested, or I'm simply interested in the problems I have, and this is what you said, that many people, they live their lives, and they are in their life, this is a small life, but it's their life. Yes, and somehow I think an important idea for a new thinking school is to reach out, to open up, and to let the people contribute in as many ways as possible. I think that's the idea. Okay, this is a problem because it's you will have a loss of precision, etc. You will have many ideas and many problems coming in. But I think that is what has to be done in many ways as possible.
I'd like to be Laura, because I think that it has to do with what Gail said yesterday, and with this thing about difficulty to engage with politics, with word, because it is complex. And I have ambivalence to this Ikigai concept, because it irritates me on one hand, but on the other hand I think, that's something what is somehow needed. And I think even this one, even build something like that for yourself is a complex task. Because it needs a lot to know knowledge about myself, about the world, about the, many things are there. And I think that people really, they are looking for these things, and to find them, they are going to psychotherapy, coaching, to many places, or the kind of spirituality. People are looking for having a kind of systemic integration, having a kind of systemic understanding of how they could be involved, how they could build something what will be stabilizing meaning. Stabilizing meaning.
Yeah.
I really like this expression. Yeah. So for me, what I was sharing with Gail already, that maybe this platform you mentioned, and then what you are saying that where people do write this thing. Yeah? It's just a fantasy, it's just an idea. But I think people are looking for this, and I see it from many different people who are wandering around, and really they are spending their energy on things which I think, oh my goodness, really. Including me in some cases. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, really?
Angels?
That's the line.
Come on. So,
The last ring.
I mean, this is going to talk about all the rings in general, but, you know, in framing it in the school, I don't think you can presuppose on anyone in a 2-week period or 1-week period what the world needs, what you can be paid for, or I can't see the ring on the far left now.
What you're good at.
What you're good at. Like, you can't do that. What you can do, okay, at least in my opinion, is have people fall in love with the idea of actually thinking about these things and being a thinker and being a learner and continuously being open to learning and thinking, which is not something that the general population does. But they would love to. They either don't think they can, they don't think they have the agency to do so, they think they're not smart enough to do so, whatever those things are. Most people don't have them right now. Even though we all fully agree, like capability-wise, they do. So that, if I think like where the school's place is in this, it is that ring that's missing right now.
Love.
The love piece, because you've got to.
I knew you were a softie in the end.
You got to, in the end, like, fall in love with being a learner and a thinker, to ask these questions, to constantly reevaluate it, and give yourself the tools to be able to do so in different methodologies, in different ways. Are you playing me out?
No, I'm sorry.
This was the theme music.
I thought it
This
turned
was
it
the
off,
theme.
and they will
Came alive.
everybody will tell you, I am a learner and a thinker. Yeah, that's the point here, and we have created together structures that
One more ring.
brings people into ideology, into limitation. Already, this is you, this is me, and things like that. I think that's really the important point here.
So the final one is that when you take away what you're good at, you can be filled with a sense of uncertainty because you just don't have the skills necessary to continually engage in what you're doing.
It's a migration problem.
It's a weird word.
Sorry?
A migration problem, what you're addressing. Many people migrating into Europe cannot do what they love.
Right.
Yeah, they have to do something else, and then they don't feel.
They might not speak the language or the cultural customs and so forth. Right. Yeah, so we have to wrap things up, so I can't go into any more depth or conversation about this one, but I just wanted to, and again, like, I would love to go into more depth about, like, the theory about it, but I just wanted to hold a space to discuss this because I feel like, the representation itself is not the thing you should be fixating on. It's just the way to represent. I mean, it could be represented thousands and thousands and thousands of ways, which is what I was going to try and get to in the deepening of the concept. But the important thing is trying to think all of these dimensions of our life, which are difficult to integrate, to say the least, and some people spend all of their life never being able to do that at all, never being able to make money with what they love, or never being able to find out what they love, all of these things, and that I think the thinking school should continue to explore this territory and to think about how we can bring this in whatever way we want to explore it.
I'd like to add something. We use this 5-twin flower model, which is quite a variation to that. We also use that on an institutional level in the sense that we organize the discussion between private companies and social economy companies, and we use this, and for all of them it was very revealing to situate what is also corporate social responsibility, like how happy are our workers, stuff like that. So it's not just the personal me life, but also social dynamics. Like
what is
the one on the left, on the bottom, is like a wheelbarrow, And that's the reproductive,
We can
the
see your
productive
screen.
work, you know.
Yeah.
What is
You
a
trans-
wheelbarrow?
wheelbarrow.
Maritza.
Ah,
Maritza.
carriola.
Yeah,
Carriola,
something like that.
Well, sorry, my
Three
drawing
languages
is
that one.
You know, it's
Yeah, I
an
think that
allocation of
just to
resources
say one,
the
and
needs
then
of
we can
people.
go to lunch.
And the one on the right is a house, and it means the care, the family, but also the oikos. You know, so the bottom one is the more materialistic, the two materialistic ones. But it's not the economy. I mean, care and productive work is both. And then the top ones, the one on the left is the tree, is your roots, but also you. The tree is a community of birds and life. But this is your self-work, you know, you're healthy, strong, you can bend with the wind, but we still, and then the one on the right is a smiley, which is your community work, we call it all work, and it also integrates, you know, the smiley is like the internet connection thing. And then the top one is the yin-yang, like a little owl, or, you know, where you sort of like step back and struggle or, you know, reflect on if it's in balance or not. And what we said, like for example, if you look at society, there's a lot of stress on the two left ones. You have to be competitive and you have to be productive, and so we suffer in the social and we suffer in the care for future generations, so there is no balance. Or you could also say that in communist regimes there's a stress on the social, you know, collective, and on the productive, but we lost the self, you know, you were considered a dissident, and we also were not very ecological. So it helps to, you know, for people to sort of look at the different, not fall into a yes or no, for or against. It's like, okay, they were imbalanced in this sense, but we were imbalanced in another sense.
And right now we're just a little imbalanced with food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I want to say one thing though, and it will be short.
One thing.
The school needs to be very careful about making people not feel like they're not good at thinking. When you're presenting all of these methodologies, and when you're presenting ones that are in natural conflict with each other, that you don't invalidate how people currently think. That it's about improving and enhancing and inviting, and not the other way around, because it can very easily turn into that. So I think that framing and how the information is presented in itself is really, really critical to that, and in creating that inviting both environment of how participants interact, engage with each other, as well as how the information is presented itself.
Okay, let's maybe wrap it. There's one more. You wanted to say something?
I just want to say a continuation of what Ivona said and Kevin said, that the school of thinking should also teach people how to think, but also to allow them to get to the process of clarity, because it is as if obvious that I know what I'm good at, as if obvious that I know what I love to do. But I think that like these two, as if obvious what the world needs, but there are people are lacking the clarity of it. So you need to teach,
including us.
Right. So you need to teach people how to know what they love, how to know what they are good at, and how to think.
Lack
about
of self-transparency is part of the model.
Or let them discover by themselves.
Okay,
But
and
if
now we
there is
can
a
go
lack
to the
of
food.
clarity, then there is a lack of agency, because you know, if you start to act, then you need to start to act with something that is, you know, near enough to do the step.
I'd like to pick up on something Geneviève just said about discovery, is that I think we use too much the word teach, as if, you know, there's a master and there's a student.
That's right.
Whereas we're in a co-discovery or a co-exploration.
And interpenetration.
Exactly.
We're like coral reef right here.
And so...
Yes, I let people discover instead of teach.
I hear also that we haven't come back to what you've said at the beginning about like self-reflecting of the group and the school on itself, that we have lost one person, that there's a lack of transparency how we are organizing or not organizing whatever is happening. I hope we'll come back to that if there is need. We still have 2 sessions.
Saifan and yours.
Saifan and mine, we're moving from the probing content or possible content to reflecting on what we are what will be constructed.